Good morning, guys. This one's going to be pre-recorded for TradingView. I haven't done a TradingView stream for a while, so also put it up on YouTube in case there's any issues as we've had recently. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump in first of all to a couple of key things that I've noticed, and I want to go back in time for some of this, just to cover what we were actually looking at back in March this year, and just to show where things have actually moved on and why. And then what I'll do is I'll come back later and pick up where I think we are now in the current move. So I'm just going to jump across to the first page on TradingView. And as you can see, we've got the calls back from March the 18th. I'm just going to cover this in a bit of detail. So this one was actually, they blew up the rocket. And the general idea, I've covered this in a few streams. If you haven't seen it and you're new to this or new to following us, um, the expectation was to come down for an A and back for a B to retest the top, and then from the B down to a C being relatively deep to give us another test around this level. Now, when you play this out, the expectations on this, let me go back a little bit. So the expectations to start with, if I zoom in, you'll actually see that the first move down was actually to the pip. It couldn't have been a better position. It actually acted as the floor and bounced straight up. Now, around this particular time, I would have liked to have seen this drop down and this drop down carrying on to give us a deeper drop before coming back up, given that I would have assumed that this was the B. We actually had a move down, and I think this was ultimately all retail hype. So the push through what I would have said being 60,000 ultimately moved up to 64, 64,500 here. And then we got the actual drop down. So we have to take that into consideration on the C move down. And if you look at this particular level at the low, we're actually looking at 48, whereas we were looking around 43.5. So there's the discrepancy of around 4K on what I would regard as retail hype there. Now, I've used the 8 hour block rather than a daily block, which might have given me a thicker line. But truth of the matter is, it doesn't matter because I never trade the fours anyway. And when I say the fours, I mean the three to the four. So the expectation was on this particular move down, we get a pullback. Now, if we shift over slightly to the A happening faster, the B ultimately happening higher, and then the C giving us a lower drop down before the move back up, which means the B was actually this pullback here, and then the C was actually this one and this particular one over here on the 10th of May, giving us the D level. So we had obviously the discrepancy of 4K in terms of the levels, but the general pattern was, where we were aiming for. And the overall D to E move down is what I was expecting, was actually down to the 30K level. So touched the level perfectly. We've obviously bounced around in this level and we've started to move back up. But the reason I wanted to highlight this on this particular stream is if we zoom in from the E move, which, like I said, we've got, perfectly on this bounce, you can see this kind of moving along sideways. As we leave the E range, we've actually come. Now, although we didn't quite touch this level here, you can clearly see it's a very strong indication. And again, even closer here, it's actually supported off this here before bouncing back and coming back to retest this level again, retesting this level. And then the original A move, we've now tested from the underside. So I think we're actually likely to get another potential test of the bottom. If we do break through this at 50, then I do feel that we might obviously carry on up. So I'll come back into this in a second in terms of the current chart. This was just something just to look at in terms of where we are. And, again, just kind of defining some of the logic I was seeing back in March, which is why I actually called this one in the first instance from obviously this particular top here. Look, so you can see the red arrow, you can see the call. I can't remember exactly what this particular call was, but this was the idea of this particular move, and this is why I was seeing it. It was all based on Wyckoff, with an Elliott forecast baked in there as well at key levels. So I'm going to step forward a little bit to I think it was the 26th of March. So yeah, the 26th of March, this particular one, you actually see that I was trying to paint a roadmap here in terms of where we are and where we were at this particular point. So clearly we could see that we were at a rough high three. We were going to get some kind of distribution pattern, which is what I was expecting on that blew up the rocket call. And if we come down into this, you'll actually see that I'm talking about this being a 5 daily top, which was ultimately a 3 weekly, giving us a 3 to 4 move down weekly, which I feel personally we're still inside a monthly three, which is why I've got this three up a little bit higher. So I'm looking at, if I'll zoom in a little bit here just to show. Now you can see that this was done the 26th of March. The idea was 3 weekly high. I would have liked to have seen this as a 3 weekly, 5 daily, inside a 3 monthly. Okay, so what I was expecting was this move to then drop down for a four, and I don't feel that we've had the monthly four yet, although there is a little bit of logic for that. I've actually just covered this logic in one of the recent videos for the subscribers. I've touched on it in the public one, which is this one here from the range to the moon. And I've actually then put, well, I guess this one was an NFT one over the weekend. I've just launched my first NFT. Um, but basically, this one is not quite public yet. We've got this for the subscribers for a couple of days, and I'm hoping by 5 o'clock UK time today, we will have this one launched out for the general public. So, obviously, I'll come back there in a second. So, going back to this in terms of the level, we were looking for the move down into what I would regard as the shallow and the deep range. This is something that we teach in our Discord, trying to get the methodology as to why this, without actually giving kind of the secret sauce away. So we were looking at this move down. I would have liked to have seen, a move into this region before some kind of move up, which is what makes me feel I don't think the monthly three is actually completed yet. Again, I spoke about this in a couple of the last YouTube videos as to composite man logic. So what I'll do now is I'll jump over to the chart, and I will actually turn this off just to give you an idea. I'll turn this off, and I will come to the levels. I'm just going to hide these a second. I'll put these back on before showing. And then I'm going to put in the value range, the weekly forecast. Okay. So on the weekly forecast, what I'm actually looking at here is that if I zoom out on the weekly forecast, you're actually going to see this as the same picture that I've just shown on the Elliott roadmap going back to March and coming down just to show you the actual picture. You actually see this. So what I've done is I've kept this on the chart without taking it off. Ultimately I was expecting the four to come down into this little value range. You can actually see at these particular levels, the top one was around 46. The bottom one was around 27, I think that is. Actually, drawing might be a little bit lower. Yeah, around 27. So 27 and 46, 47 was actually the range based on some things, like I said, that we're actually teaching in Discord. And ultimately, when I turn the chart on, you'll actually see what we've done. We've come down exactly into the range, and we're now actually looking to potentially leave this range. So I'll come now into the current live charts and just explain a little bit of what I'm actually seeing. So like I said, we've actually covered this in some of the YouTube streams recently, in some of the videos that we've actually posted. But if we were to assume a weekly three move here, and this given us now a weekly four, the assumption would be we're aiming for a weekly five up and around this level. Okay. Now, if we put a W in here, being the weekly, my assumption is that this is likely to now become the three on the monthly time frame. Okay, so if we were to run some extensions on this is what actually is quite scary for me in terms of thinking a composite man, with the Wyckoff and the Elliott bias that I personally use, is that if I was to stick this in and we were to come from these particular levels down to three, so we'd have to assume that this being the daily zero, we have a daily one, and this is just going to be quite broad, and then we have a daily zero here, daily two. Then ultimately what we're seeing right now is that we've had clear as day a move here on this one towards the 1.618, which is good enough to classify this as a three. So we've actually got a one, zero, a one here, a two sitting there, and this move ultimately being the three on the daily time frame. this was actually a 38% pullback, giving us the perfect 4, and therefore this being the 5. Okay, so the expectations now is on the daily move, we'd actually like to see some kind of A, B, followed by a C move down, and that would give us, again, a kind of a range that I'm not going to go into on this one, but ultimately we're aiming then for, once we've cleared that range, another move up. The only problem is, and this is where it gets really fascinating, is that if we were to assume this being the daily move, right, and we're actually aiming for now daily fractal moves within the overall move, the assumption a lot of the time is that the move from 5 down, so ABC, given us the 2, could come all the way as far as 99%, which means we could easily come into this particular level. Now, some assumptions would be down around this level. So what we could easily see is, before this move up takes place, we could clearly see something like this instead, giving us, a nice move down A, pull back B, and then into C, and therefore this becoming the C, for argument's sake. And it could be, just question mark at the moment in this particular range, okay? So just keep that as a question mark. And therefore, if we assume that we are bullish now after the low being here, then the assumption would be this is a 0 big picture, and this is currently the first fractal move in the 0 to 1 away from here. We would then see this as the 2 move, giving us a 3 push-up, back down 4, and potentially completion on 5, okay? So this would then give us the 5 of 5, which takes us to that monthly 3 inside the weekly 5 at this level, okay? So just giving some ideas on this, if I was to use the extensions and say, okay, we're going to go from 0, let's just assume that this was the 1 now, and we come back middle of the range 2, then ultimately what we should be seeing and expecting is something that looks a little bit more like this, right? We would see a 2 pull back to the middle of the range. I'd like to see a move up to 69, 70k, 70k back down, usually to the 38% on this particular move, which will actually be then the 4 on the bigger time frame, and then realistically a completion of that move being up and around the 90 to 100k level, 92,000 it's got there, around this level for a completion at the 2618. So that really is what I'd be expecting, assuming that we are actually bullish right now. Okay, so I'm just going to get rid of these a second just to finish off with. Right, so the assumption is, like I said, 87 to 92 roughly in Fibonacci extension terms, using just the pure simple 2618 and the 1618, given our current situation, given where we are currently at the moment. Okay, so that's the assumption on the bullish side. Now, I just wanted to cover this just one more time based on the current monthly situation. And this is not so much a, this is what I feel, it's just something that I have to keep in the back of my mind. Because the problem that we have is, if we assume that the monthly 3 was in, and therefore this is a monthly move rather than a weekly, which, I've had this conversation several times since March. If we assume that this was the monthly 3, which there is some logic for it to be, we would have to assume that in the move down, we've only had the A move, which has given us now a B move, and this becomes the C move, which could create a lower low before giving us the move up 5 on a monthly time frame, okay, which means we'd be looking for a 4 down slightly lower on a monthly 4, something like this, right? So at that particular point, what we'd expect then is, on a monthly 5, we'd expect, a decent bear market, and given it would be a monthly, it would be over the space of, a year or more, in terms of downside pressure before seeing anything, major kickoff. So that really is just something to keep in the back of your mind. I'm not saying that this is bullish or bearish at the moment. I'm still waiting for confirmation. I'm still looking for the character when we get into this kind of pullback move. But just to justify this one step further, if I zoom out to the current monthly situation, what you have now, if you know anything at all about Elliott Wave, you know that in terms of a corrective move, they need to move in moves of three. Now, ultimately, even if you're having some kind of zigzag pattern, you're actually going to see 3-5-3 in terms of the overall move. If you just get a standard zigzag on a smaller time frame, so going monthly structure, but using the weekly time frame for the fractal, then realistically, we've actually only seen a 5 move down, giving us a 3 move back for a potential 5 move down. So therefore, it is easy to justify the monthly move down. It is kind of concerning because our extension to the three before another big high is only going to be back around the 65, 66K level, which means we might go up to 66 and back down to 40 before ultimately moving on up to 90. And therefore, right now, I think until one of these scenarios are really justified, I'm happy to just sit out, kind of wait and see where we are, see where we're actually going. At the moment, it does feel pretty range bound, which doesn't give me confidence on the bullish side. However, in the current bullish move on the daily time frame, we are currently in the pullback 3 to 4. Sorry, even closer than that. It's actually the 1 to 2 pullback in the shorter time frame. So yeah, that's where we are at the moment. This is kind of the overview. This is, like I said, my first one for TradingView for a while. Like I mentioned earlier, we've just launched our first NFT. This is Michael Saylor on his bull ride. A bit of fun, but ultimately, in terms of the chart, I just wanted to cover where we were, where we are, and off you go. So links to obviously Discord and the NFT in my description, and have a great week.